My husband's blind, and this is why he lied about being blind. Paul, why did you lie?
Wow, this is the third degree I'm getting, huh?
Why did you lie?
Why does anybody lie? Because they are afraid, because they don't want to be judged, because they're worried to get ahead. Sometimes we lie because we don't think it'll hurt anybody. So that is why I did it. When I lied,
That's shocking.
it was because
I'm not sure I can sit here in the same room with you.
it was because I really wanted to advance my career.
Wow. Finally. It's about time.
It's about damn time.
Okay, tell us the story. Set the scene.
I was 20 years old. Mm-hmm. I was taking a break from college, as one does.
As we all do.
Midway through their degrees, I was I had moved to the San Francisco Bay Area to get my college degree, and I kind of ran out of money, those international fees. So I moved back to Canada at the ripe age of 20 to get a job. It was actually like my first ever real job, because prior to that, I would say my first job was as a child actor. I did commercials, as you know. I was in like a few international commercials and a few national Canadian commercials. So that was my first official job, but it wasn't until I was 20 years old at this stage of life that I got my first like entry level minimum wage job at a Canadian icon, Matthew, the Blockbuster Video of Canada. And our Canadian viewers will know that I am talking about none other than Rogers Video.
Okay. I mean, that sounds like an appropriate entry-level job.
And because I was a movie buff.
My first one
Yeah.
was being an assistant at a law firm.
That is so cool and
Yeah.
totally unqualified to do it. Okay, we're getting off track. So I'm 20 years old. I get my first job at a video store. I, of course, still had filmmaking dreams. Despite being diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa 4 years earlier, I was 4 years into my sight loss journey. And of course, my fear was, Matthew, that if I disclosed to the people hiring me that I was losing my vision, that of course I would not get the job. My fear was, of course, if they saw me as disabled, that they would disqualify me from the position. I was completely dense, of course, because I actually feel that if I had been honest about it, that they would have, it might have even increased my chances, because I think that it's important for every establishment to have somebody represented with disabilities, and I knew that they didn't have that. But I honestly was not talking to anybody about how the inner workings, and I was just afraid this would kill my chances. I needed the job so bad to pay my rent, to buy groceries. I was completely out of any help from my parents at this point. And
You were broke.
I was totally broke, and I needed the job. So I lied. They asked me point blank during the interview if there was any issues that they should be aware of, and I was like, absolutely none. And they were like, great, so you'd be fine like closing the shop at night. We close around like, I think it was like 11 p.m. Late at night in the dark. And at this point in my sight loss progression, of course, I was completely night blind. And I was like, yep, I can do that and walk home in the dark and I'll be fine. And I was just like terrified I wouldn't get the job.
Wow. Okay. So I'm sure some people were expecting you to say that you have been lying about being blind. Not that you
Right.
lied
About being sighted.
about being sighted as a blind person.
Right. You know, I don't know who would ever lie about being blind. I think that would be such a strange thing to do, to tell people that you had a disability when in fact you do not. But I do think that my experience as a blind person on a vision loss journey, or anybody with a disability that is progressive, we've probably all been in a situation where we have been dishonest about the extent of our disability for fear of ableism, because there is a lot of ableism in the world, for fear of being treated differently or seen differently in the eyes of the society. I think at some point we've tried to cover up the disability and not be forthright about it. And for me, of course, that first time, it really was because I needed a job. I wanted work.
Yeah.
And that is why I did it.
Yeah.
But to your point, it did result in some very unfortunate things, which ultimately led to me having to come clean.
What happened? Okay, well, first, what things happened?
Well, we were in a bad part of town. I lived in East Vancouver, and it was on East Hastings Street. If anybody in the Vancouver area is aware, this is sort of like there's a bit more crime in that part of the city. It's true. It has a lot of character, and I lived in East Vancouver, and I love it. But there are more robberies there. Woo!
Continue.
Okay. There's more crime, there's more robberies, there's more shoplifting. So it was a daily issue. People would come in, steal stacks of DVDs and go running out the door. Of course, we weren't allowed to chase them. I remember one girl getting in big trouble because she chased a guy down the street, and our manager was scalding her afterwards because, of course, that just put her in a really dangerous situation. So we couldn't do that once they were off the property. Can't chase them down the street. I had to stay one time and talk to the police as they reviewed surveillance footage. We had like a bargain bin DVD section, and they would just scoop up big stacks, and they would threaten us with bloody needles.
Ooh.
I guess infected needles? Like, don't come near me, I'll poke you. It was like, it wasn't gunpoint, it was needlepoint. We're like, go for it, dude. Take as many.
I've done needlepoint before.
Different kind of needlepoint. I had to identify the guy.
Okay.
Because they had all the surveillance footage, and I guess they didn't know who stole what. And so I had to point out the guy I thought took the DVDs.
Did you know who you were pointing at?
No! I did not!
Oh!
I couldn't tell. Matthew, first of all, it's a blurry image to begin with. It's like a surveillance image. Eeny, meeny, miny,
wow. Innocent lives were put in danger.
Listen, they were all guilty just for being there. But the moment for me, the breaking point in this period of time, I worked there for about a year, was I was closing the store. I had to walk home. I lived about 4 city blocks away.
Okay.
And on this particular night, it's raining. I got my umbrella. It was a straight shot. And I would count the curbs. I would count the steps. And there were different...
The steps?
I would count... I knew how many steps every block was. And I would count.
Oh, how many of your strides?
My strides.
How many...
And
how many strides was a block?
I don't know what it was. It was a while.
But you'd count so that you knew when you were reaching
Yeah.
the next curb so you could slow down.
And I had other little markers. There was a gas station on one of the corners. So, of course, that was bright and lit up. And I would just kind of follow it like a moth to the flame. But there were 2 blocks before our house that was pitch black. These very dim street lights. And it was terrifying. I would actually get on my cell phone and talk to my roommate until I got all the way back home, and she would actually look for me out her bedroom window, which was on the 3rd floor, and she'd say, I can see you, okay, and she would guide me. She would guide me back to the house.
Left, no, right.
Yeah, yes.
Watch out!
And this is back before I had a cane, a dog, or anything, and it was just like through cell phones. I see in the light of the gas station a guy walking toward me, and he was kind of like falling and sauntering and coming toward me, and I was like, okay, this guy, he's drunk,
inebriated.
He's inebriated, or it could be something else, and he's coming toward me, and he's kind of muttering to himself. You could get a sense of these characters, and I had a bad feeling as this guy approached. And as he gets closer and closer,
you turned around and ran.
What? I ran into a pole. I've been a city boy for much of my life. I've lived in cities. And I was just like, I'm just going to keep my eyes fixed on the light of the gas station, and I'm counting my steps. I'm just going to walk right past this guy. But I could sense he was trouble. And as he approached me, he took a big swing and a lunge, and he actually hit me right on the top of the head. And
Where?
I think on the top of the head.
Like right there on the crown?
Actually on the crown of my head. And I think he had brass knuckles or something on, because it punctured my skin.
Oh.
And it shocked me. I dropped my umbrella. And I'm in kind of shock adrenaline mode, but I know I can't run because I will run into something. I don't have enough sight to flee the scene. He looked at me and he was like, you want to fight?
Just like that?
And as he's saying that, he's like beating his chest like a gorilla.
You did. Me want to fight!
In the midst of his proclamation and challenge, I suppose,
in
the midst of his challenge, he tripped backwards off the curb and into the street and fell backwards and just toppled over and hit his head on the pavement.
Ouch.
There were no cars coming.
Okay.
If there had been like a semi-truck coming, I think I would have had to like dive into the street and try to save my assailant. But it was a totally empty street. There was no cars.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, this is my chance to get away.
Yes.
What are you doing?
Fixing things. Okay.
So I then sped walked my steps.
Sped walked.
Sped walked?
Speed walking?
I walked speedily.
Speedily.
Away.
In a speedy fashion.
And I was counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 to get to my 27 steps to the end of this block.
27?
And
You said you didn't know.
I know, I just made it up. And I could hear him behind me, but I'm like getting further and further away, and he's not chasing
Oh, that's
me.
good. Okay, he wasn't chasing
And I
you.
immediately got on my phone and told my roommate. There was like a little bit of blood. It wasn't like coming down my face or anything, but had a huge goose egg on my head.
Oof.
And I made it home safely. I was totally petrified, terrified. Are you checking? Matthew,
Looking for scars.
this was like a long time ago. I had to tell my manager. I had to come clean and tell her, listen, I cannot close anymore. And at this point I was like, I might lose my job, but I have to tell her I'm completely night blind. I have retinitis pigmentosa. I'm losing my vision. And of course, the first thing she said was, why didn't you tell me?
That's what I said after we'd been living together for a year, Paul. Why didn't you tell me you're blind?
Yeah. But she obviously disappointed that I hadn't been honest. So I guess the moral of the story is if you have a disability, don't lie about it. You know, you don't have to share every detail.
Right.
But when it's important, like a job or a relationship, be honest. You will find probably that it was a good decision.
Did you lose your job?
Yes. I'm kidding!
Don't do that to us, Paul.
No, I did not. I kept my job and I was never put on a night shift again.
Better work hours.
And I got better work hours. And I eventually left the job because I went
And
back to school.
Did the police ever ask you to review footage anymore?
That never happened again either.
Okay.
Yeah. I
It
got
worked out.
out a lot of things. Now, what do you think of me? Now that I've told my whole story.
Oh, I still love you.
Now I'm glad I got that off my chest.
Everyone, that happens to everyone.
Yeah. But Matthew, that actually wasn't the very first time I ever lied
What?
about my... No, I lied before, and probably this one you won't give me as much credit for because I lied and it put a lot of lives in danger, and it was a very, very stupid lie. And same thing, lying about my blindness, but this one was
Goodbye ring.
perilous.
See this ring? We're done with this.
So on the extended episode today, I'm going to tell you about that very first time I lied about my blindness. That, yeah, I do regret to this day. It was not a smart decision, but thankfully, you know, everybody survived. So, so we'll talk about that on the extended episode. All right, Matthew, any guesses?
Yeah. Well, I think I know.
You do.
I think I do know. I think I know this story.
Yeah. So this actually happened before my diagnosis. So that's my one little caveat is that I actually didn't have a blindness diagnosis. However, I did know that I was night blind, and I did know that I had some vision loss issues, and I thought it was just called night blindness. I didn't know that it was called retinitis pigmentosa. I hadn't been diagnosed by a specialist.
Well, if you missed the harrowing experience where Paul endangered
Come on.
thousands of lives.
No.
Okay, a few.
A few. Maybe.
Okay.
A handful of lives.
You can you can head over to Patreon right here. Watch all of the extended videos. If you want to stay right here on YouTube, tap this video right here and you can listen to the whole story.
Do you know what our most popular stolen DVD was? Miscongeniality Part 2. Sandra Bullock's very popular with the crime community.
In Canada.
Yeah, in Canada specifically.